I am so happy to be with you all today. I'm Tonya Thames Taylor. I am from Fallowfield Meeting, which is in the western quarter of the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting. I am happy to be here. So today what we're going to do is, and I'm welcoming our first thing that I would like to do is that whatever land is in that area, I give the land acknowledgement for that. I would also like to thank the winds from the east, the south, the north, and the west, and this earth that's been so good to us. And I would like to, give homage to that. And again, I'm so happy to be here with you today. So the big query, we look at things, we look at elements coming from queries, right? And so I'm hoping that I can have, and I can, is it any way that I can have the screen share that can come on so I can share some images on the like sort. So one of the biggest queries that, a query that I want us to sort of think about as I
Go ahead.
Okay, yes. Okay, as I have this conversation and I want us to be thinking about is this query: how do we create space for ourselves when confronted with truth? How do we create space for ourselves when confronted with truth? And so I grew up in Mississippi. I'm a native Southerner. And I love to spell. When I spell Mississippi, I always go back to my childhood spelling of Mississippi, which is M-I cricket I, cricket I, hump back I. And that I always go back because it's a pleasant memory when I was on my grandmother's porch learning how to spell Mississippi. And that was the song that was given. And on my grandmother's porch down there in Gulfport, Mississippi, I was just inundated with stories. And these stories, they had levels of, they had values in them, right? Or, they tried to get us to think about areas. So like to go to that query, how do we create space when confronted with the truth? I want to sort of take you to like my grandmother's porch, and I want us to have a conversation, a quick conversation. And that conversation, so one of the pieces that they didn't know the name of Aesop, right? But one of the fables that when I was a kid that I learned that I liked, it's an Aesop fable. And in the Aesop fable, it's about the dog and his reflection, which I just, I really like this story. So I'm going to now share it with you right quickly. So there was a dog, and I'm going to, for those who are on the camera, not on the camera, I'm on the camera, I'm going to zoom it in a few bits. So there was a dog, right? A butcher had given him a great bone, a bone. So as he was walking home, y'all, he was so happy with his prize. He was just walking and walking and walking. And then next thing you know, he was just in his mind, he was thinking about what I'm going to do with that bone, what I'm going to do with that bone. And I mean, he gets there, he's now getting to cross over a bridge. He looked down and he sees, what is that? Is that a bone? Wait, that bone looked bigger than my bone. Look at that dog with that bone. And then next thing you know, he saw himself, but he didn't know you all. He looked down, he thought he saw another dog. He then went and let me go and get that bone from that other dog. And what he did was that when he sat there and he tried to grab at the other dog, if you will, what happens is the bone fell out his mouth. And then when he jumped in the water, not only did the bone fall in his mouth, he jumped in the water, he barely made it out. And when he got to the bank of the river, he says, oh my goodness, what did I do? So here's the story. A dog to whom a butcher had thrown a bone was hurrying home with his prize as fast as he could. As he crossed a narrow footbridge, he happened to look down and saw himself reflected in the quiet waters as if in a mirror. But the greedy dog thought that he was looking, he saw a real dog carrying a much bigger bone than his own. If he had stopped to think, he would have known better. But instead of thinking, he dropped his bone, sprung into the water of the river, only to find himself swimming for dear life. At last, he managed to scramble out, and as he stood sadly thinking about the good bone he had lost, he realized what a stupid dog he had been. And the moral of that story is it is foolish to be greedy. But in this case, and in this story we're going to talk about today is about how that dog, how he had to get, when he got confronted with the truth, what did he really do with it? His greed took him to a certain place. And so the story, that the best way to do that is, by trade, I'm an historian, and I'm also a Southern historian. And so now, right now, I want us to go into a contemporary issue. So when I was growing up in Mississippi in the late 1970s and early 80s, what happens is that there was a #1 show, and that #1 show was the show called The Dukes of Hazzard. And so I want us to look at that together, the Dukes of Hazzard. And I want us to listen to the theme song. This theme song is about, well, let's just listen to the theme song first. I had started a lot for him. Again, this is
just a good old boy, never meaning no harm. Beats all you never saw, been in trouble with the law since the day they was born. Straightening the curves, flapping the hills. Someday the mountain might get them, but the law never will. Making their way the only way they know how. That's just a little bit more than the noble line. Just a good old boy, wouldn't change if they could. Fighting the system like a true modern day Robin Hood.
all right. So the #1 show in the one of the #1 shows in the late 70s and early 80s was the Dukes of Hazzard. And what we did not realize is that we were being inundated into something called the lost cause, right? It was really a continuation of the American Civil War. And in this particular show, the boys, Bo and Luke Duke, they're really like Confederates. We know that because on the top of their car, they have a Dodge Charger that was a Confederate flag. The car was called the General Lee. And then at the very end of that, they did the rebel yell. So now, what is we talking about when confronted with the truth? Well, here it is. And so what happens is, it was a group of women. They were called the United Daughters of the Confederacy. They were the counterparts of something of the Sons of the Confederacy. And what the United Daughters of the Confederacy did was gaslit a nation. So what do you mean by gaslighting, right? So gaslighting is a term. It's I'm gonna pull up the term here for you so you can see. Gaslighting is when it's an insidious form of manipulation and psychological control. Victims of gaslighting are deliberately and systematically fed false information that lead them to question what they know to be truth, often about themselves. They may end up doubting their memory, their perception, and even their sanity. And over time, a gaslighter's manipulations can grow more complex and potent, making it increasingly difficult for the victim to see the truth. And so right now in America, we now have a conversations about what I call them I call them memorials because that's what I grew up in the South. The rest of the nation called them monuments. And so one of the pieces that the United Daughters of the Confederacy was able to do was that they were able to get they have Confederate monuments throughout this nation. And those monuments were basically to pay homage and to reverence to Confederates who, but they consider it is their ancestors. And so they say that we should honor them as a nation. And so they built a lot of these statues that are up. And so what they did was they even told people that the American Civil War was not about slavery. The American Civil War was about slavery. The Mississippi secession very much makes that clear. The Civil War was about slavery. But what the United Daughters of the Confederacy did was that they used curriculum and then they used popular culture. And they said, okay, this is how we going to, even though we lost the war, right? This is the way that we're going to create this grand romanticism around something called the lost cause. And the lost cause is a philosophy it's a concept. And then again, that is the lost cause basically says that the American, this is pseudo history. It claims that the cause of the Confederate States of America during the American Civil War was just, heroic, and not centered on slavery. And so now, again, the lost cause praises the traditional culture of honor and chivalry of the antebellum South. They argue that enslaved people were treated well and denied their conditions, and was essential, and denied that their central and denied that their condition was the central cause of the war. Now, this is contrary to most, if not all, of the Confederate States themselves saying what they were going to war. They were going to the Civil War over, slavery. And so what this nation is doing is now it's grappling with the fact that, what are we going to do with this history? Because these monuments now have been up. The Americans, the United Daughters of the Confederacy was operating really strongly between 1895 and 1920. They built and they continued to build statues afterwards. And so what now the nation is grappling with, okay, but we have this history, see, but yeah, it was a myth. It wasn't even real. And so, but now you have people who are going to battle with one another. A young lady died in Charlottesville because somebody believed a myth. And so now when this conversation is happening around these myths, well, what do we do with this? What do we do? How do we reconcile this? People are saying, wait now, you got some components, this woke history, it's wrong, it's threatening America. And then you have this other group that's saying this woke history is enlightening America, right? And so you got this sort of going back and forth. But the reality and the truth is, right, is that the United Daughters of Confederacy created a myth, the Sons of Confederacy. Americans bought into it. They were gaslit. They believe it to be true, and now they don't know what to do. And so I'm going to show you one last piece before we go. So to get this sort of story here. Right now, if you go, there is a conversation about, because at Arlington Cemetery, for a longer conversation, I can tell you how the United Daughters of the Confederacy, before women even got the right to vote, they had so much influence that they were able to get the United States colored troops who fought with the Union during the American Civil War. They couldn't get a spot in our Arlington Cemetery, which honors the memory of people who fought, for American principles and values. They were able to get a statue, it's a Confederate statue, in the Arlington Cemetery. And so now in 2022, they said that the cemetery, this Arlington monument, it is full of mythology. Here's an image here of it. For those of you who can see on the screen, there's an image of a Black enslaved woman, giving a Confederate a baby to kiss. There's a enslaved man on here. It's full of mythology. And so what happens is the panel agreed that this monument should be removed. Now the question is, right, what to do with the statue? And in many ways, that's the question that we're going to go into worship to think about today. When you are confronted with the truth, because again, this is something that's going on now. And in 2023, there's a more recent article about this, because now that we know that the statue is coming down at Arlington, we don't know where to put it. We don't know where to put the falsehood. We don't know how to reconcile with this huge monument that we all have these relics in our lives, a lie or a mythology that we've told ourselves over and over and over again. Where do we now put it? Is the question, is that they're asking at Arlington, and they're saying, well, what should we do? And it goes back to that question. When you now have been facing something in your own life, a mythology, you find out it is just that. Do you fight to keep it because it's comfortable? Or how do you make space for the truth? Because right now, if you go any article in 2023, there was a recent article in the Washington Post, we don't know where to put this, but they don't know what to do with it. Just like I don't think people know what to do with the truth. Like Jack Nicholson in some movie, I forgot the name of the movie. He said, you can't handle the truth. You know, it's like, look, what to do with the truth when it comes and it makes you uncomfortable. And for that, that is our query for worship today.